Hello, my name's Steven Reed, and you're watching another Hyperdrive Pictures visual effects tutorial. I'm trying to, every once in a while, up the production value of these, so hopefully the sound and the lighting and the fact that you can see me is an improvement. If not, well, I'm just going to go straight into the tutorial. Before I do, the tutorial we're about to watch is how to do the particle effect in our latest video, Tesseract Returns, which you can find somewhere on this page, linked up above. And I've also divided this tutorial into little chapters if you want to skip around at each separate effect that I'm about to show you. But here we go. I'm going to show you how to make the particle coming out of the Tesseract effect for your own videos right here. Alright, so we're going to go into After Effects and make our effect in this composition. I've got raw footage right here in my comp, and I've already gone ahead and motion tracked it, so I don't have to waste your time with that. And we're going to just go on and jump into it. So first thing we're going to do is make this cube look like the Tesseract using a composition I made already called Tesseract Interior. And if you want me to, I can make a separate tutorial on how to make this. It's a little complicated, but it's a very simple way of kind of emulating the Tesseract effect you see in Captain America and the Avengers. But what we're going to do first is lower the opacity to about 50%, center it over the cube, and we're just going to scale it right into the cube. That ought to do it. And then lower it a bit. Then we'll bring it back up. And then we're going to turn it off. Then we're going to make a new solid, and we're going to call it the matte. We'll make it black. And it's matte slash, but you know what? That's okay. And we're going to turn matte off, but we're also going to zoom out a hair, get our pen tool, and then just draw over our cube. It's very simple. Then let me bring that in. Okay, so we're going to turn this back on. We're going to make this a alpha matte for our Tesseract Interior, and then we're going to feather it 3 pixels and expand it a bit. We're going to go to the Tesseract Interior, set its transfer mode to multiply, and then we'll see some of the dimensionality of the cube underneath. You can see the edge on that side of the cube there. So that's the easy part. Next thing we're going to do is parent both of those layers to that null, so that way as the camera moves around, so do our layers. And we're going to get into the meat of the tutorial right here. So let's get started. New solid, and we're going to make this a little bit bigger than the frame. So let's make this 2200 by 1238. And we're going to go to Effects, Trapcode, Particular. And we'll call this layer Particles, just so it's easy to keep track of. Alright, in particular, we're going to make this particle effect, hence particular. So what we're going to do first is change our emitter to a point, and the velocity is going to stay at 100. We'll get that to that later. We're going to make it a directional emitter, so basically where it's going to point these particles in a direction. Right now we need to, I've gone ahead so you can see the particles being quote-unquote born. We're going to need a camera, and 24mm is good for this. Okay, it's going to be directional, and we are going to mess with the rotation. So we're going to mess with the X rotations, that way it's going straight up, like so. So that's about 90 degrees. Or exactly 90 degrees if you know your geometry. Then we're going to change our direction spread to 0. So now these particles are going up in a straight line, and we're going to mess with the velocity, so that way they're going up faster. Let's make this 1000. It's pretty fast. So you can see these particles moving so fast that you can see the gaps between each individual particle. To fix that, we're just going to make a bunch more particles. So let's just try 1000, and I'm still seeing some gaps, so let's try 1600, 1800, 1900. Why not 2300? It's based off of a lot of effects that I've seen on Video Copilot, so if you are a fan of Video Copilot and have watched a lot of the tutorials, this should seem very simple and very familiar to you. So what we're doing is we're making a solid stream of particles. And now, with our camera, we're going to go to our camera, And we're going to mess with the camera tools to place this right behind our Tesseract. So right there. Now you'll notice that the camera is kind of tilted in real life, so we should likewise tilt our camera. So let's, I'm going to do it inside of the transform effect so it's a little bit more controllable. There we go. And if I'm using the wall as a reference, you can see that that lines up and it looks like it's really nested within reality there. So I'm going to move that back down to here. We've got this stream of particles, and here's where we actually start to make it look like we have in the video. You're going to go down into the physics. We're going to go to the air physics, turbulent field, and now we're going to have it affect the position. We're going to have it affected around 200. And you can mess with this on your own to see what looks best for your video. But basically, if I scrub through this, you can see that this stream isn't a solid stream. It's kind of wavy and amorphous and doing its own thing, which is pretty cool. So let's change this to linear so it's happening a little bit sharper. That is the first beam effect. Now we're going to duplicate it. And we've got the exact same effect on top of itself, but we're going to change the position of it. So we've changed the position of it. We're going to move it off to the side. Then we're going to go to that turbulent field, and we're just going to make it -201. So that way it changes up the distortion. It makes it look a little bit different. Going to make a third duplicate. Going to move it over to the left, and I'm actually going to move it on the z-axis towards us. So it's kind of like a triangle of effects right there. And on this one, we're going to mess with the effect position a little bit more, and we're going to mess with the, let's see, evolution. And that'll just change where the distortion is happening in time. And now we have a different looking effect on all three beam particles, but keep in mind we've done this with the exact same one layer. And we're going to keep modifying this layer. So we're going to duplicate our bottom particles again. We're going to make this one into smoke. So we're going to go and we're going to go to the particle options. And you can see that there's actually a particle type for cloudlet, which is pretty much smoke. And we're going to go back up here. We're going to change the direction spread, so that way they are allowed to spread out a little bit, not much. I'm going to leave it at 5. Then I'm going to take the emitter type, make it a box, and then we're going to take this box and change the emitter size. Alright, that's good. Now let's move it over so it's right kind of centered on top of all three beam particles we have so far. We're going to go back into our particle type. We're going to change the size. We're going to make these bigger. So let's try 25. Right now it's kind of blocking out everything. But then what we're going to do is change the transfer mode to screen and set the opacity to 20. Let's do it even less. Let's do 5. Even, well, also we don't need 2600 of them. Let's try 600. That's pretty good. Let's do 450. So I'm modifying the particles per second, so that way I'm changing the amount of particles that are in the frame. Particles per second means literally how many particles are born every second. So the less you have, the less particles are on the screen. And that looks pretty good. That looks very good actually. Now I'm going to make sparks out of these same things. So this is our smoke. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to call this one sparks. And I'm going to change it from cloudlet back to sphere. And each of these is going to be a spark. So I'm going to turn off the smoke just so I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. So we have our spheres. We're going to take the size and put it back down to 0, or let's do 1. Let's solo this because these are going to be very small and we want to be sure that we can see what's exactly going on here. Now let's go take our opacity, set it back up to 100. And you can already see we're getting some sparks there. And the thing about sparks is they're little streaks when they're flying. So let's just turn on the motion blur for that comp. And you can see there those little streaks right there. Let's change the velocity so they're really flying. And let's make the direction spread 7. And then let's go down to that turbulent field and make it affect it even more. So they're just flying all over the place. And let's see, what else can we modify here? Let's make these sparks a little bit bigger because they're hard to see right now. So let's go for 2 pixels wide. Now you don't want to overdo it at this step because in a little bit everything's going to be very magnified when we glow everything. So that's good. Let's make this 200 sparks per second because you don't want to overdo it. That's a good amount right there. Alright, so we've got all these layers that we kind of modified from the same one layer, which is really cool. So you spend all of your time modifying one thing and then you just duplicate and save your work on everything else. Now we're going to take it and put it underneath Tutorial Effects Raw, and I'm going to color this blue just so I can help distinguish them from everything else in my composition. Next thing I'm going to do is make a new adjustment layer. Put it right underneath Tutorial Effects Raw. I'm going to turn the motion blur off on the comp so this can all render faster as I'm working. Then I'm going to go in and parent everything to null 10. And while I'm in here, just so that way we save ourselves from any problems later on, I'm going to change the particles from normal to screen on the transfer mode. And let's put this at a third because it's about to get very, very render heavy. So I'm going to turn this off. Let's make this glow. Now there is a stylized glow option in After Effects, but this is a cool effect I learned a while back from the Force.net fan films forums, and although that forum is not up and running anymore, I still like to use the effect, and this is my little shout out to the Force.net. We're going to go with that adjustment layer and use a fast blur. Repeat edge pixels. And it's going to blur it, let's just stick with the classic 10. 10 pixels. Now we're going to set that first layer to screen. So when you set an adjustment layer to screen, you're going to be able to see the defined layers underneath it. And of course that only works if you have a background layer. Make comp size BG. Let's move that all the way down to the bottom. So, just so you can see what's happening here. Normal, everything's blurred. But the cool thing about transfer modes on adjustment layers is when you set it to screen, for example, you'll still see all the distinct features underneath, but then it'll, as if there was a screen layer on top of it, add the adjustment. So we're going to take that adjustment layer, duplicate it. And I'm hitting Apple D. You can do this in Edit, and then go to Duplicate if you want. On the second layer, we're going to set it to 20. Third layer, if this was a lightsaber, I would do 30, but because I really want this effect to spread out, I'm going to do 40. Then I'm going to do another adjustment layer, and I'm going to set this one to normal. And I'm going to get rid of the fast blur. This is where we're going to get our color. We're going to go to Color Correction, Color Balance. And again, this is straight from an old tutorial on the Force.net. We're going to just set it to 100 on midtone blue, 75 on highlight blue, and 50 on highlight green, because I looked at the Avengers and the Tesseract isn't completely blue. There's a little bit of green to it, and why not? Let's bump up some green in the midtones. Not a lot, just a little bit. Alright, so we've got this cool looking glow, but how are we going to get it on our footage? It's underneath everything. Well, remember how we're working with transfer modes? It's actually really cool. Just set that mode from normal to screen, and it's going to show you everything underneath. Except now we have this annoying, it kind of ruins the effect right there because you see it going on top of when it should be behind the cube. Well, that's an easy fix. We're just going to take our mat again, put it underneath turn this on, and that should fix our problem right there. Boom. Now it looks like it's behind our Tesseract, and if I move around, everything should be staying in sync, which is really nice. Now there's not a lot of motion going on other than the very beginning. Next thing that I did is I added a lens flare, and I've done this effect before on how to really motion track it well, but I'll show it to you again, why not? I'm going to add a light, hit P, change the Z position to 0, and move it right in the middle of this Tesseract. And I'm going to parent it to the null, make a new solid, lens flare. Going to use another Video Copilot plugin. First time I'm using this tutorial, but I'm using a lot of Video Copilot techniques in general. And pick a cool flare or make your own flare. But let's use blue steel because that caught my eye. It's going to load in there, and then we just set it from 2D source type to track lights. Set it to, again, you guessed it, screen, which is probably my favorite transfer mode, and you've got yourself a Tesseract effect. And you need to turn the Tesseract interior back on. And on my copy of After Effects, when I'm in 32 bits per channel, I get this weird yellow clipping. The way I get around that is I render the lens flare as its own composition by soloing it, and then taking that new rendered out MOV and putting it on top of everything, turning off the lens flare, setting the new MOV to screen, and then rendering it all out as a finished comp. Alright, that's the effects. So if you have an effect that you'd like to see us cover, be sure to leave it in the comments below. We read each and every one. Also, be sure to subscribe. We release new videos every Wednesday, and also check out last week's video, which is the Tesseract video that this tutorial is from. And that video is a lot like what we usually do, which is heavy effects spoofs and parodies of video games and movies and anything popular like that. We make it funny. We make it look really good for you guys. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.